Oldbrook, Nebraska, wasn't the sort of place that made headlines. It was a town of 5,400 souls, tucked between cornfields and county roads, where the grain elevators were taller than the high school, and where Friday night lights still lit up rusting bleachers. One gas station, one diner, two churches, and a rail line that cut straight through its east side, the old Farmington crossing. Most folks in Holbrook didn't think much about the trains. They came when they came. Grain hoppers, boxcars, the occasional tanker. The northbound always groaned through in the morning. The southbound passed just after 7:15 a.m., like clockwork, its whistle echoing down the two-lane stretch of Farmington Road. But after January 2023, that crossing wasn't just a rail line anymore. It became something else. A landmark, a question, and the reason was a dog. The first person to notice him was Rick Matthews, who drove a grain truck for the local co-op. It was the second week of January, snow still packed in the ditch from the New Year's storm. Rick pulled up to the edge of the crossing and hit the brakes just as the crossing arms lowered. The early light reflected off the tracks like water. That's when he saw him. A big, black and tan shepherd mix, seated perfectly still on the far side of the gravel. Just watching, not pacing, not barking, just sitting there, like a statue made of fur and silence. Rick waited until the train passed, rolled forward, and slowed beside the dog. The dog didn't move, didn't even turn his head. Rick leaned out the window. "You lost, buddy?" No reaction. After a few seconds, Rick shrugged and drove on. He told the story later that night at Burke's Tavern, but no one thought much of it. Farm dogs wander. Coyotes chase them. Some make it home, some don't. But the next day, the dog was back. Same time, same place, and the day after that, and the next. By the third week, folks started calling him the track dog. He wasn't aggressive, didn't beg, didn't chase cars, didn't even bark. Just showed up at the crossing every morning just before 7:15 a.m. and sat still as a stone until the southbound train passed. Then he'd stand, turn, and walk back into the trees behind the co-op. A few tried to follow him, but the dog always disappeared into the woods. One woman, a retired nurse named Sylvia Henning, left out a water bowl and half a chicken sandwich. The next morning, the sandwich was gone. The bowl was empty. The dog was seated exactly where he'd been the day before, watching the tracks. It wasn't until someone posted a photo on the town Facebook page, "Anyone know this dog? He's here every single morning," that the pieces started coming together. His name was Cody. He had belonged to Walter Fielding, a 76-year-old retired railroad conductor who had lived on the east edge of Holbrook his entire life. Walter passed away in his sleep on December 28, 2022. Cardiac arrest. No signs of struggle. Just never woke up. He'd been alone. Well, not quite alone. Cody had been there. The paramedics who arrived said the dog was curled beside the bed, head resting on Walter's chest. Wouldn't let them near him at first. Wouldn't move for over an hour. They eventually coaxed him outside and took him to the county shelter. But the next morning, he was gone. Fence bent, gate cracked, empty kennel, gone. And 3 days later, he showed up at the crossing. Walter had worked 40 years on the railroad. He drove freight trains all over Nebraska and Kansas, retired in 2008, and rarely left town after that. Everyone said the same thing about him. Quiet, predictable, knew every whistle pattern by heart. He didn't go to church, but every morning at 6:50 a.m., he drove his pickup to the edge of Farmington Road, parked in the same gravel turnout near the cattails, and waited for the 7:15 southbound train. Sometimes he sipped coffee from a steel thermos. Sometimes he sat with his window down, listening. And Cody, always in the passenger seat, watched alongside him. They were a pair, rain or shine, year after year, until the seat went empty. Now Cody was still coming, only he wasn't in the truck. He was alone, watching, still, as if keeping a promise no one had made. 6 streets west of Farmington Road, in a single-story duplex with peeling yellow paint and a rusted mailbox, lived a boy named Aiden Langley. He was 8 years old, small for his age, quiet. His mother, Leah, worked nights at the Holbrook nursing home, tending to patients who called out in the dark for names they couldn't remember. She slept during the day, or tried to, while Aiden drew trains. Not just cartoons, detailed renderings, boxcars, couplings, rail junctions. Sometimes whole freight lines, drawn with the precision of someone 3 times his age. He kept a flashlight in his backpack at all times. He liked how light worked, how it cut through things, how it found what was hiding. Sometimes he turned it on under the covers, just to watch the beam tremble against the ceiling. It made him feel safe, in control. Aiden didn't talk much at school. He spoke, but only when it made sense to him. He liked order, repetition, familiar paths. Every day after school, Leah would walk with him to the end of the block, where the sidewalk curved toward a large oak tree. They'd stop. Aiden would take out his flashlight, click it once, then put it away. Then they'd turn back. Every time. Same order, same rhythm. He never crossed the street without her. Until the morning he did. It happened on May 2nd, 2023. Leah had come home at 5:30 a.m., her scrub still smelling faintly of antiseptic and decaf coffee. Aiden was asleep, tucked in with his stuffed seal, flashlight on the nightstand. She turned off the light, kissed his forehead, and collapsed into bed. She didn't wake up when he got up. She didn't hear the front door click shut. She didn't see him walk, barefoot and careful, through the dew-damp grass toward the edge of the neighborhood. He had a mission. He wanted to find the train. The track was maybe a mile away, but Aiden didn't know that, not in numbers. He just knew the sound, the way it built like thunder, then faded. He followed it, through yards, past the grain bins, toward the low metallic rattle he felt in his chest. At 7:09 a.m., Aiden stepped onto the gravel that bordered the Farmington crossing and sat, right between the rails, his flashlight in his lap, waiting. And Cody was there, already seated in his usual spot, eyes fixed on the horizon. At first he didn't move. Then his head turned, just slightly, toward the small figure sitting down the line. The boy, the light in his lap, and the southbound train approaching from the north. At 7:14 a.m., the engineer of Route 311 saw something on the track. Dark, low, unmoving. Then something else. A dog, standing between the train and the boy, barking. Once, twice, then louder and louder. The brakes engaged. Steel screamed. The train slowed, not enough to stop in time. The engineer radioed, "We've got a kid on the line, and a dog blocking him." Cody didn't leave the tracks. He barked again, then stepped forward, not toward the boy, but directly into the engineer's line of sight, and held his ground. The train stopped with 41 yards to spare. 3 crew members jumped out. The boy didn't flinch. Cody stepped aside only when the conductor reached Aiden and knelt beside him. "You okay, buddy?" Aiden looked up. I was just waiting. For what? He blinked. The train. Then softly, and the dog. Cody lay down beside him and stayed there, while the train crew radioed the sheriff, while paramedics arrived, while Leo was found sobbing, running barefoot down the shoulder of Route 6. Cody never moved, and that was how a dog, who had waited every day for a man who never returned, ended up saving a boy no one knew was missing. The town of Holbrook didn't wake up expecting to be a headline. But by noon on May 2nd, 2023, its name was on the local news, then the regional wires, and by dinner, on every national feed in the country. Dog alerts train crew, saves missing child. Aiden and Cody, a Nebraska miracle. The track dog was real, and he was watching. Cable anchors called it incredible. Online commenters called it faith. But in Holbrook, it was something else entirely. It was familiar. It was Cody. The town already knew him. The silent figure by the tracks. The one who showed up every morning without fail. Through wind, through snow, through fog thick enough to erase the trees. He didn't ask for anything. Didn't need attention. Just stayed. Now, they knew why. The next morning, a crowd gathered by the Farmington crossing just after sunrise. No one called them. No one coordinated it. They simply came. Some brought flowers. Others brought treats. A few just stood silently, watching the empty spot where Cody always sat. But that morning, he wasn't there. He was at the Langley home, curled on the rug beside the couch, his nose resting against Aiden's foot. Aiden had barely spoken since the rescue, but when someone asked if he wanted to go outside, he said only, not without Cody. So Cody stayed. Sheriff Granger, not normally one for sentiment, stood in front of the gathered neighbors at the crossing and cleared his throat. Walter Fielding used to sit right there in his truck, he said. Every morning, like a clock. After he passed, we thought that tradition went with him. He pointed to the tracks. But the dog didn't forget. He paused. And now neither will we. Within days, the local high school shop class began drafting designs for a small monument. Not much, just a curved bench and a plaque. But by the end of the week, it had grown. The mayor approved a small fund. The co-op donated steel. The conductor from Route 311 sent $200 in cash and a handwritten note. He saw us when we didn't see him. Back at the Langley house, things changed slowly. Aiden slept longer, ate more. He began drawing again. Trains, of course. But now there was always a dog in the picture. Cody stayed close. At night, he slept near the front door. During the day, he lay in the sun just outside Aiden's window. Once, when the boy dropped his flashlight behind the couch, Cody nudged it back with his paw, slow and careful, as if he understood exactly what it meant. Leah tried to explain it to a reporter once. "He's not just a dog," she said. "He's an answer to a question I didn't know I was asking." She paused. "I think he waited long enough, and now he's choosing to stay." When summer came, the mayor's office held a small dedication ceremony. They installed a bronze plaque at the crossing, just beside the tracks. Cody, the dog who waited, the dog who watched, the dog who saved, in memory of Walter Fielding, in honor of Aiden Langley. More than 200 people came. Aiden placed his flashlight beneath the plaque. Cody sat beside him, calm, steady, present. And when the train passed, every conductor on board leaned out the window and waved. By August, the mornings in Holbrook were thick with heat. Cody began rising a little slower, his steps more deliberate. His coat no longer as dark, the gray creeping further along his snout and chest. But his eyes, they stayed bright. Every morning, just after 7, Aiden and Leah would walk him down to the crossing. They never used a leash. Cody didn't wander. He walked with purpose. Always 2 steps ahead, always stopping at the same patch of gravel where the cattails bent from years of wind. He'd sit, watch, wait, and when the train passed, he'd turn around, tail swaying once or twice, and head back. The statue was finished by mid-August. Cast in brushed iron, it showed Cody in a seated pose, facing slightly east, toward the tracks, toward the place Walter used to park. The artist included fine details: the texture of the fur around his neck, the slope of his ears, the quiet intelligence in his brow. When the curtain dropped at the unveiling, there was no cheering, just a long, respectful silence. The town had learned, from the dog, perhaps, that not everything needed to be loud to be meaningful. Cody sat beside the sculpture, nose twitching. He sniffed the base once, then lay down at its foot and closed his eyes. That fall, Aiden returned to school. He spoke more now, in short, precise sentences. Still quiet, but clearer. His therapist said he had begun using new words. His drawings were now full scenes: train stations, landscapes, clouds, lights, and always, somewhere, a black and tan shape in the corner. Every Friday, Leah and Aiden stopped by the crossing on their way home. Sometimes they sat on the bench. Sometimes they left a biscuit on the plaque. Sometimes they said nothing at all. In late October, something changed. Cody didn't rise one morning. He wasn't sick, just still. Aiden sat beside him on the porch, gently brushing his fur with small, even strokes. The flashlight rested beside them. The sun came up, soft and golden. Eventually, Cody stood. He walked to the corner of the yard, looked once toward the road, and then back at the boy. Aiden whispered, "You don't have to go today." Cody blinked and lay down again. That was the first morning he missed the train. He skipped the next day too, and the next. Neighbors noticed. No one said anything at first, but by the end of the week, someone left flowers by the statue, a candle, a note. "Thank you for the mornings. Thank you for the wait." On November 3rd, just before sunrise, Leah stepped out onto the porch and saw Cody standing at the edge of the yard, facing the crossing. His tail wagged once. She stepped toward him, but stopped. There was something final about it. He turned his head, looked at her, then back to the tracks, and walked away. Slow, purposeful, without pause. Cody never returned. He wasn't found. Not at the shelter, not in the fields. Not at the edge of the woods where he used to disappear. He was simply gone. Some said he'd gone back to Walter. Some said he was tired and needed a place to rest. But Aiden said something different. He said he chose not to be found, and somehow everyone believed him. Winter came early to Holbrook. The first frost settled over the fields before Thanksgiving. The trees behind the co-op turned to black silhouettes against gray skies, and the crossing lights blinked into empty air. But the bench stayed clean. The statue stayed warm under hand-knit scarves left by schoolchildren. And the plaque, that small brushed bronze plate, began to shine where fingers had touched it again and again, every day, even after the dog was gone. Aiden didn't cry. He never asked where Cody went. He didn't need to. He still walked past the crossing every Friday after school, sometimes alone, sometimes with Leah. He still drew trains, but now they were quieter. No crowds, no horns, just long, silver lines winding into empty hills. And always at the very edge of the picture, a shadow-shaped dog, watching. On the 1-year anniversary of the rescue, the town gathered at the tracks just after dawn. No speeches, just candles. They stood in silence as the 7:15 southbound train rumbled past. The conductor blew the whistle, 2 short, 1 long. Aiden stepped forward and placed a flashlight beneath the statue. He clicked it on, left it there, and turned away. Later that week, a reporter from Omaha asked Leah if she had anything she wanted to say on the record. She thought for a moment, then said, "Some dogs chase things, some fetch, but some wait. And that waiting isn't about loyalty or grief. It's about knowing where silence belongs." The reporter didn't ask for a follow-up. He just wrote that down and printed it word for word. People still visit the tracks. They leave biscuits, scratched notes, collars from dogs that passed, and sometimes they just sit in the quiet and listen to nothing, to everything, to a kind of memory you don't need to explain. Aiden is older now. He still doesn't talk much, but sometimes when a train passes, he lifts his hand and waves. And once, only once, he whispered, "He's still here, just not the way we think." And then he smiled. Moral: some lives are marked by the noise they make, but others, the most faithful ones, are remembered for how long they were willing to sit in silence, to wait, to watch, to protect, until the very end. Like, comment, subscribe, and share this story with someone who understands that not all heroes run. Some simply stay.